Hello and welcome to Class 3 lecture. I hope you're having success in working with your organization and putting together your proposal. So in this lecture, I will be talking about more about the idea, about some research on funders, the problem or need statement, and the federal grants. So what are the hallmarks of a good proposal? First of all, a great proposal has an innovative idea. Sometimes reviewers at foundations see the same old program ideas over and over. You may recall in lecture 1, I talked about one of the trends in funding right now is innovation. So if you can come up with an idea, an approach that is innovative using technology or solving a really critical problem, you're much more likely to be funded. Number 2, the organization has expertise, but is willing to admit they may have some weaknesses too. That's actually okay. Of course, we know that as individuals, but as organizations, it's okay to do that. Now, of course, you don't sell that big time, but it's okay. What's most important, though, is you truly understand your capacity and you're able to state that in the proposal. Next would be that you've done your homework. The organization truly understands the issue. They've brought credible research into the program and to the proposal, and that the funder can recognize that they have thought through the entire process from top to bottom. Everything connects, it all makes sense. They've thought through every detail, the time, the money, the cost needed, the people needed, and you've done your homework, it's obvious. Number 4 hallmark is that the applicant is doing a project with, not to, those you're trying to help. And that's a really important distinction in general for philanthropy, is that we assist people and we work with the neighborhoods. If you've had previous class with me, we call that's called ABCD, which is asset-based community development, which means you work with those in a community or a need. You don't go in and help them and turn around and leave. You actually involve them in the process. So with, not to. Number 5, the applicant is not all entirely focused on their own project or own needs. One of the hallmarks of great nonprofit organizations is they always go for the greater good. What I mean by that is if they're dedicated to serving hungry people, and there's another food pantry across town that runs out of food, that nonprofit will share their resources with the other nonprofit organization because they care more about helping the cause than they do promoting their own organization. So just make sure that your proposal doesn't look like it's strictly about promoting you or selling your organization. A lot of organizations fall into this trap. The goal of their organization seems to be to perpetuate their organization more than it is about the people they serve. Number 6, a hallmark of a good proposal shows that the applicant will invest some of their own money. So when you do your budget, you're going to want to make sure that you have some skin in the game. The organization needs to show how they are invested. It's not just the funder, and it's not just outside entities, but the organization cares so deeply about it, they are willing to invest some of their own funds into the project. Number 7, the organization is determined to do the project with or without dollars from the foundation. In other words, they're going to make this happen. They are not wholly dependent on the foundation to make it happen, and they're going to do it no matter what. But the foundation would certainly make it better or help them do it with effectiveness. Number 8, the organization or applicant has a comprehensive approach, really understands the complexities of issues. And I can't emphasize this enough. You know, most of the problems that we deal with in the nonprofit industry are wicked, terribly complex issues. They are not black and white issues. They're not a light switch where you flip it on and turn it off. Poverty, racism, environmental issues, the economy. I mean, you know, we could go on and on. These issues are not black and white issues. They're all very complex. So the funders want to know that you truly understand. So comprehensive means you understand it and that you're also going to probably work with other organizations who have expertise. Number 9, you're going to collaborate because it's unlikely any organization can address every single issue in every single problem. So therefore, you do what you do it well, but you let other organizations do what they do well, and then collaboratively, you're much better when you work together. Number 10, the applicant is willing to have an evaluator assess the project. In other words, there's nothing to hide. They've thought through the process and they believe that transparency is a good thing, and they're willing to let anyone look in at any time and maybe help them to be better and more effective along the way. Number 11, the applicant will continue the project after the funding is done. This is called sustainability. So in other words, we're going to do this project, but we don't think that the time frame of 1 year or 2 years or whatever that may be is going to be enough. So even after the money from this grant is over, we will continue serving the people in need until the problem or issue has been resolved. And then the last one is that the applicant project has potential for broad impact. You know, people, individual donors, funders, they're interested in broad impact. They're not interested typically in helping 1 or 2 people. So if you can show how it has a broad impact in a community or a region, you're much more likely to be funded. All right, let's talk a little bit about foundations right now. If you're going to be writing grant proposals, you need to understand the basics of foundations. So I think we talked maybe one of the previous lectures about the different kinds. First of all, private foundations, which is primarily where you are going to get your funding. Private foundations are usually founded by a family or an individual, or they can be a corporate foundation listed as a private foundation. And there are 2 types of private foundations. The first called operating foundation. So operating foundations have their own charitable causes, and they don't give grants to outside organizations to do anything else. So as an example might be they start one to address a certain need. Maybe it had something to do with a family member, or it had something to do with an important cause for their family, or whatever. But they have an operating foundation, means they have their own operating programs, their own causes. They don't give money to outside entities. And then the other type of private foundation is called a non-operating foundation. So that's the opposite of the other one. They don't have their own programs or services, but what they do is they fund other nonprofits, other charitable organizations who do good work. So you can see they're both private foundations, but one is operating, meaning they do their own, and the other is non-operating, which means they don't do their own programs, but they fund other organizations that do. So if you're writing a grant, generally it's going to be from a non-operating private foundation. And then the other kinds of foundations, we have number 1, private, and number 2, corporate, and then and I don't know, that should be number 3, not number 2 again, community or public. So we sort of talked about the private. It's a non-governmental organization, and it usually has typically one funding source, a family. It could also be a corporation. It is managed by its own trustees and directors, and it does have charitable, it must, in order to get its tax exempt status, do one of the things the IRS listed, which we talked about in a previous lecture. It makes grants primarily to other nonprofits unless it is an operating organization, then they service their own, and they are required to file a 990-PF with the IRS, which stands for 990 Private Foundation. So here are a couple examples regionally. You're going to have the Musgrave Foundation, the Slusher Foundation, the Dar Family Foundation, and then on a national or international scope, you'll see private foundations such as the Gates Foundation and the Walton Family Foundation, which is actually lesser known than the Walmart Foundation, but nonetheless, they give away in excess of $500 million a year. They are significant. So they're typically going to be funded, or they always are funded, by an individual, a family, or a private corporation. Now, they are required by the IRS to distribute funds based on their year-end value. So the year-end value is determined by the IRS, and then the funding going out is 5% of their year-end value. So obviously, the better the year, the better the economy. And see, now this ties into, if you remember that circle I showed you where nonprofits get their money, If you were to look at the circle for a private foundation, that's going to look entirely different than most nonprofits. They have a lot of investments. So they have serious investments in stocks and in other bonds. They might have all kinds of businesses interests. They might have endowments. So they're making money off those every year. The better the economy, the more they make, and generally the more that that foundation is going to be giving. And now let's look at corporate foundations, which are created as by companies as separate legal entities, and they are nonprofits. So these companies that have them, it's part of the company, but in the same breath, it's separate in that they have their own 501c3. And these organizations are usually by companies who want to do good, but as an example, they don't have the tax status to receive donations. So Walmart obviously is a for-profit company. They can't receive donations, but their foundation can, like Ford and like Target and hundreds or thousands of others, BKD Foundation. So many large firms and corporations have foundations. These are corporate foundations and they are nonprofit, but they do good. And then they do great in-house programs. They likely give to some of them give to outside entities. However, you will see some foundations that are funded entirely for their own purposes. So they might not help outsiders, they might only do inside projects, but they're certainly worth checking out. And then the last or third kind is the community or public foundation, grant making, and they receive their funds usually from donors, and those could be endowments, those could be individuals that want to give, and then community foundations are oftentimes funding community needs, and the bigger footprints are giving more. But I just threw a couple up from Missouri, Kansas City, St. Louis. Springfield has Community Foundation of the Ozarks. And you can see there are foundations all over the United States, community foundations. And they're typically giving out grants to nonprofits or to entities that are doing good in the community. Now, sometimes those are scholarship opportunities, educational, healthcare, they vary, but community foundations are typically very important to local communities. And some of them are really huge, like the Kansas City nonprofit is very big. And what areas do they typically fund? So the National Taxonomy of Exempt Entities, called NTEE, lists the 10 main areas or divisions where funding is given out to nonprofits from foundations. So arts, culture, and humanities, education, the environment, and animals are grouped together, then health, human services, international, public, society or benefit, religion, membership organizations, and then those that just don't have any classification. And I will tell you that underneath each one of these NTE numbers, there could be hundreds of subcategories. For instance, health is going to have everything from hospitals to clinics to specialized healthcare to dental to mental health to, on and on and on. So these are big categories, and underneath them, again, it gets very complex. And you can go online and look at the NTEE classifications and see the different ones that they put out there. So who gives the most money? Well, it might not surprise you to know, and this is the most recent list put out, that the Gates Foundation, and this is annually, give $4.2 billion a year. Silicon Valley, which there are some big players out there, are giving almost $2 billion. The Buffett Foundation, upwards of 589 million. Ford, Lilly, the Jewish Fund. There's the Waltons again, the Hewlett Foundation, and Chicago Community Trust. Now these are big players. These are the heavy hitters right here. And now I brought it down to, and you can find the state. Every state has a giving. And in Missouri, there it is. The number one giver is the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation. And if you look through that list, you'll see the Community Foundation of the Ozarks is the only other community foundation on there. You'll find foundations spread out across the state, but primarily those are going to be in larger cities. Kansas City has a lot of foundations listed on this, and one of the big reasons is because of the Kauffmans. So you see the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, and then you see the on the bottom of the list, another Kauffman, Muriel McBrien Kauffman Foundation, and they're major givers. And then you see some corporations. You see Enterprise, you see Emerson, you see Bayer, and Anheuser-Busch, big givers. And again, these are only the top givers. I mean, and every state has significant givers, but typically the larger metro areas are going to have the biggest. All right, now where do funders like to give their money? These are the 5 main categories that you're going to see that most foundations, most funders want to give money to. Programs or special projects. They like to fund new work or innovative work, or something that's going on in a community. And I put a star by that because that is almost always the best one, or the one most likely to get funded. I put capacity building up there. There are some funders who will give to capacity building, and I think there is a trend to give more toward that than there has been in years past. However, I will tell you there are many foundations who will come right out and say, we do not fund capacity building. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, capacity building is just growing the organization. Now, there are also plenty of organizations that do not fund capital projects, and that's going to be like if you're building on, you're putting up a new building or you're expanding, they do not fund that, and that usually includes both equipment, land, and buildings. Some do, but yet some don't. Many foundations do not give toward endowments. Some will, but many don't. And an endowment is basically money that's put in a preserved fund. It's called a restricted fund, and it can't be used. It can't be pulled out. The money that grows from it, like the interest on it, is used to sustain the organization and the work. But most funders do not give to endowments. And then operating costs, or what we would call program costs, to fund the basic needs, paying the rent, the utilities, the printers, computers, things like that. Some funders will give to that, but I still see many who do not. So again, the star is up there because that's the most likely area that you're to get funded. Some of the others may. The important thing here is make sure you have read their giving guidelines and their priorities, and you will tell, and it should be pretty specific. If it's not, you might want to take the time to ask them specifically about that before you write a proposal and spend a lot of time with it. It might be well worth your time to check on that. So as you research funders, here's simply what you're looking for. Your nonprofit exists for a reason. It has a mission, it has programs, and it has something it's trying to do. The foundation, the funder, exists for a reason. And that foundation has things that are important to it, things that matter, priorities and goals. And what you're looking for is that sweet spot where there's an overlap and you can find the shared goals, the shared priorities, the shared interest. That's where you'll have success. So as you're researching, look for those things. So go on their site, review their mission, review their funding priorities. And by the way, those change. So if you've applied someplace before and you think you know it, don't assume that, go back and check, because they do shift depending on the needs of communities or nation. Number 2, evaluate whether their mission aligns with yours, and then you'll know if it's worth your time and a good match. Number 3, review any extra materials they provide. Sometimes they will actually let you inquire, or they might have an additional document of some time that goes into further depth. And some of them even have like a little quiz or assessment, and you click off the answers and it tells you right away whether you're a potential candidate. And then look to see who they have funded before. You can actually do that. Sometimes they'll list it on their website, or you can go onto a Form 990 and you can get a sense of whether they fund organizations like yours. So if they have a history of funding healthcare or exercise or children or literacy or whatever that may be, that may be a sign you have an opportunity to get funded, and you're more likely to. So keep in mind, it's all about that sweet spot. It's all about the fit. It's all about the shared interest. In the lecture last week, I talked about the Ozarks Health Advocacy Foundation. And so I pulled from their website some of the wording, and here's what it says. The OHAF, as they call themselves, is a foundation whose primary purpose is to give support to C3 organizations that address critical health needs in the following counties, and then it lists them. And it says, emphasis is placed upon projects which exhibit collaboration with other organizations, vision, and understanding of the needs identified in a community report card. And that's an annual report put out every 2 years by the Springfield and Southwest Missouri. Now, if you were seeking funding from this foundation, what are the important things you would want to recognize right away? Well, you start at the top. If you're a C4 or a C6 or any other C besides a 3, you might as well just forget it, go on. They don't fund anything except C3s. Well, what if you live in middle Missouri or southeast Kansas, southwest Kansas, and you think, you know, I'm pretty close to this area? Well, you might as well forget it, because if you're not one of those following counties listed, they don't fund you, you're out. But wait, it doesn't stop there. What if you like to do your work alone and you don't like to partner with any other organizations because, well, you just think it's too much of a hassle to collaborate? Well, you probably aren't going to get funded. Or what if you don't really have an in-depth understanding of the need and the problem, and you don't even know about the community report card, so you don't know what the needs are? Well, if you don't take the time to find out and study that community report card, I would say you're not going to get funded. Now, this is a very small foundation, and that's a very small listing of what they do and don't fund, but I'm trying to drive home a point here. If you don't take the time to look line by line of what they say, and you can't match up with that, you're wasting your time and you're wasting the organization's time. So it's critical to make sure there's alignment. So I would encourage you to go on their website, read their mission and vision, get an idea of what's important to them, look at their program areas to see what they like to fund and what they do, what they care about. See if you can find any stories that have been listed. See if you can find organizations that have been funded in the past. Look at their guidelines, look at their criteria, do everything you can. And I've listed a couple of organizations here, but I mean, spend time going to the website, and if possible, and unfortunately, there still are some websites that do not do a good job of listing that. You may have to follow up, but it's important to do as much homework as you can. That tells them a lot about your organization. You should not be asking questions about things that have already been answered on their website. And then I just threw up a couple of examples here of Target, MacArthur, Bank of America, and you can go on there and see what's important to them. And it's a good example, a good exercise for you just to go on and look at these different sites. Now you're going to have access to the Foundation Center, which I've talked about earlier. It's the king of searching out funders. But there are a couple other sources there, TGCI, and then that extension, and then the Grant Station and the Grantsmanship Center have sites, and you can get some limited information from those, and those are free. Briefly, I referred to the 990 earlier, and some of you may not be familiar with that term. A 990 is a required annual form. The IRS requires every nonprofit organization, well, I shouldn't say that, but C3s, C4s, and 6s, and many of them have to complete a 990, and they turn that in every year. It's a report form, an information form, and it lists a lot of information. For foundations, PFs, 990 PFs, they actually list who they fund. So there you go. I mean, that's a great thing right there. You can go on to guidestar.org, and I'll show that website coming up, and you can figure out organizations. Now, nonprofits that haven't received tax exempt status from the IRS, of course, they don't file them. Most churches don't file. Government entities, state, federal, they don't file. And some organizations are under a broader umbrella. So they are under what we would call a tax regime. An example would be if there's a mothership. So American Red Cross, their local agencies, hardly any of them have their own C3. They're under the broader umbrella of the national one. Or that may be true for a lot of entities. And that's what we'd call a federated nonprofit. But some nonprofits don't file because they're under the umbrella of a larger organization. And here's the different types of 990s. The PF, which we've been talking about. For small organizations, that have 50,000 or less under they're bringing in 50,000 or less in income every year, they file what's called an e-postcard or Form 990-N. There is no information on GuideStar about that because they don't, it's too small. They don't put that out there. 990 Easy is for organizations who typically bring in under 200,000 a year, which again is going to be almost 75% of them. That's a very small return. It's only 2 pages, and it has limited income or information. Form 990 is the big one, and that's for organizations that are over 500,000. Most foundations then are going to fall under that. And you can go onto guidestar.org and look that up. And that's a great exercise for anybody. I would encourage everybody to get used to using GuideStar. And by the way, you can sign up and get a free account there. And if you have a free account, then when you go there, you can log in and you get access to a lot more information than if you don't have an account. All right, let's talk a little bit about corporate funding. So a lot of corporations like Home Depot, Best Buy, Lowe's, Target, so on and so on, they give a lot of money to nonprofits, and they like to do that regionally. Now, one of the advantages to that is that oftentimes there aren't as many organizations applying to them. And a good thing about that too is if you can build a good relationship with them, they're more likely to fund you year after year after year. And they like it if you get the media out there, you do a press conference, you get some cameras rolling, it brings goodwill to them. And here's the thing we've talked about before in this class already. They really like to give locally. If it's a local Home Depot, a local Lowe's or Target, they love giving locally because their employees are local people, and then they can get their employees engaged in some kind of project, and then it's a win-win. Everybody involved is happy. So that's one of the advantages to corporate funding. If you're seeking funding, don't forget about them. And here are examples. And I put that up because I want you to see they don't all use the same word. So some of them use the word responsibility, giving back, community. You just have to go in there and look to see what their word is because you don't know. But if you hunt around long enough, you can usually find something. All right, I wanted to talk briefly about government grants. And to start out, I want to talk about what we call federal pass-through or flow-through money. So the federal grant often will give money to a state agency or a local entity, and then they are what we would call a prime recipient. And then they have the money, and then local organizations that want that money have to apply through the state or local agencies. So as an example, if there was some kind of funding to support a certain cause, a local agency might be the prime recipient, and then everybody else who wants it has to apply for federal money through the local recipient. So the one who holds the money is called the prime recipient, and then the ones who get the money, even though it's federal money, they get it from a local recipient, they're called sub-recipients. And that's just some information to know. So you can see the feds give money to states or local entities, and then the states or local entities pass that down to nonprofits. That's what we call flow-through or pass-through funding. There are advantages and disadvantages to government funding and grants. One advantage is they can be significant. I mean, you know, hundreds of thousands, or in some cases, 7 figures. Another advantage is once you have obtained a grant and you do a good job and they're satisfied with your reporting and your outcomes, you're much more likely to continue to get that. And it's really a great way to build credibility to say you're partnering with like the Health and Human Services or whatever program that might be. That really gives you instant credibility as an organization. So those are good advantages that you can see on the right. There are disadvantages. First of all, writing a proposal for a federal grant it can be a mountain project. It's enormous. It takes a terrific amount of time. The reporting requirements are heavy. I know of organizations that were recipients of federal funding, and again, I'm talking, you know, 400,000 and 500,000 a year. They actually willingly gave up their funding because the reporting was so heavy. They didn't want to do it. The competition is stiff. Most organizations that apply get turned down. Fewer than 10% get funded. And the guidelines are considerable. You know, I mean, it is the federal government. They have restrictions. So a lot of nonprofits want to do their own thing. The reality is if you have federal money, you're going to play by their rules. If you can't do that, you should not be partnering with them. I mean, that's simple. If you're a faith-based organization and you want to pray with people and the federal grant says no faith can be part of your work, and I mean, some might allow that, but I'm saying if they say no religion, literature, or whatever, and then you get this money and you want to implement a program, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. You cannot do anything religious in your grant or in your program. That's just that, you know. So those are the things to think about. And then most of their grants are short term, and it does require you to start the process again. But as you look back on the other advantage side, once you've done it, you have a lot of advantages in getting it again. And I also want you to be aware of something called the CFDA, which is the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance. It's a huge, exhaustive directory of federal programs, projects, and services that provide assistance. And you should know about that, and you should go on that. You can also go on to grants.gov and look there. And those, again, are great resources, and I would encourage you to look at those. Those are not going to be on the foundation sites because these are government assistance, government grants, but as a grant researcher, a grant writer, I wanted you to be aware of them. So keep in mind, look for those funders that have interest in your topic, look for the local ties, and again, check that 990 if it's not on their website and see who they funded in the past, because that's going to give you a lot of insight into who they're likely to fund again. Oh, and some things about abbreviation, RFP and RFA or RFS. These are some terminology you'll see. So an RFP is a request for proposal. You'll see that with funders, and you'll also see something called the RFA, which is a request for applications. And in other words, we're open to receiving applications for the funding. And then there's something called NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability. Those are terms, especially if you're thinking about government grants, that you should know those, because that's frequently what they'll do. Like the subject line might say NOFA or RFA or RFP. And then the funding announcement is another term they use when they have monies available. So this is kind of the process, if you will. If you were doing a government grant, you know, you would solicit them, you would fill out an RFP, or you would read it, then you would complete a letter of inquiry. If they allowed it, you would submit an application, and you might potentially have a conference with them, electronic conference. It's possible that they would give you the opportunity to submit a complete proposal. It is possible there would be negotiations based on your proposal, which might or might not meet their needs. And then you could come to the end, which would be the funding. Now notice it says contract. Now let's look over here on the private funding, which you, in many cases, except large national or international, you can also oftentimes submit a proposal unsolicited. And then it's possible that you will get contacted by the foundation, or you get some kind of response that says, we believe we would like to learn more. And they might have an inquiry, or they might not. They might just refer you to their guidelines. And then you would submit a proposal. It's possible you would be contacted by the foundation to say, we would like to do a site visit and talk with you. It's also possible you would have an opportunity to go to them, or your board might be asked to make a presentation to them. And then if it were a success, you would be notified and you would get funding. Now here's an important distinction between the government one and the private sector one. When you get money from the federal government, that is a legal contract to do work. Essentially, they're hiring you, your organization, to do work. When you get money from the private sector, it is more of a mutual agreement. It is not so much as a legal binding contract. Now, that doesn't let you off the hook. It doesn't say you can do anything you want with the private funding, but I just want to distinguish between the two. One is a government contract. It's a binding contract. The other is more of a good faith agreement between two entities. All right, the needs statement. What are the most pressing needs in your community? Whether you're in Springfield or Missouri or Kansas or Illinois or some other state, what are the most pressing needs? Now, when I ask that question in class, I get people right off the bat who say, oh, it's this, it's this. And then I look at them and I say, how do you know? And they say, because I just think so, because I've met people. And the problem with that is we run in circles. So I have my circles, you have yours, and yours aren't mine, and yours aren't other people's. So we have to prove that a need is bigger than just our opinion or our hunch. So we really have to come in with some credible evidence. So the need statement, or the problem statement again, is going to answer, why should anyone care? In other words, you care, you want the money, but why should people care? Why is it urgent? Why do you want our money now? Why should this program be implemented right now? And why is it bigger than just a handful of people? It will be your responsibility to paint that picture. So again, you will define the problem. You're going to describe who's affected, how they're affected, why it's important, and then you tie that back into your organization and your mission, and then you bring in how you understand the funder, the foundation's mission is to do this, and that proves that there is great alignment, and this would be a cause or program you are sure that would align with their mission and they would be interested in. And then part of this too is you have to show gaps. So I said earlier, it's possible other organizations have attempted to do this or are doing it now, but there remains a gap. There remains a gap between what is being done or should be done and what successes are occurring. And then you have to back everything up with research and credible evidence. So one approach to this is what we would call the problem, cause, action, solution approach. There's a problem, there's a cause, you explain it, you're going to take action, and the action results in the solution. It's that simple. Problem, cause, solution. We use that also in speech making. When you're presenting a problem, and then you present why it's a problem, what your proposal is, and how that would be the solution to it. All right, the problem then, again, is what's going on, who's affected, where is it happening, how frequently, and then why is it happening? What's going on? What causes this? See, now this has to tie into your program, because you can't list a cause and then have a program that does not address one of those. So you have to tie that in. And then the recognition, why is it a problem that kids go 3 months in the summer and don't read? Why is it a problem that they come to school hungry and you're proposing to serve breakfast? You see where I'm going to this? You have to describe why it's a problem and who's affected by it and who else sees it as a problem. Number 3, the implications. If we don't do this, what's going to happen? So we talked about this in the last lecture. What's the cost of doing nothing? What if no one takes care of these kids and they continue to be or neglected or abused? What should we expect will happen in 10, 15, and 20 years? What are the implications for our community? Or if you're a national organization, what are the implications for our nation? What are the hurdles to getting this done? Why is it a problem? Why is it a challenge? If it's been attempted before, why didn't it work? What's changed? How will you do it differently? And what has prevented the resolution of the problem in the past? So you want to address those hurdles, because if you're a funder, you may have even funded previous programs and wonder why they didn't work, and here someone is asking for money again. And then why now? What's urgent about it? What is currently being done about the program, and why is it urgent right now? And number 6, what does solving the problem mean? In other words, why should outside funding be used to solve the problem, reduce the gap? And be clear about this now. Be clear about what can be accomplished within this time frame. And if you at all can, use human interest stories. And I said previously, you don't want to get too sappy and too emotional, but you do want to include stories. So what if, as an example, CASA helps children in foster care and gives them an advocate? What if you could tell the story of a young lady, and I know many of these stories, a young lady who was in the foster care and was moved to 14 different foster homes and had 14 different caseworkers, and she was lost in the system, but had one CASA volunteer who started with her and stayed with this young lady from the time she got into the system all the way through high school. This lady and her husband helped get this girl enrolled into college, paid for part of her college, was there with her at her graduation, helped her get a job, and today this young lady is a caseworker working in the foster care system. Now, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what will, and these are true stories. What if you could tell a human interest story like that? Don't you think that would move someone to say, yes, that's the kind of program I do want to fund? So if you can, find real world stories and then put a face on it. Okay, again, your need has to have credible information from the variety of sources. It cannot be just your opinion. And if you're addressing a local need, you can't just use outside data. You have to bring in local data. Make sure that you're addressing a local need and it ties to your organization. And again, I'm repeating myself, but it has to be a good match. And if there's anybody else doing it, describe how you will already partner with them or do something differently. So all credible evidence has to be timely. It can't be something 10 or 15 years old if you're citing it. It should be unbiased. In other words, you don't want to have a medical pharmaceutical company saying the answer to the problem is this specific drug. Oh, and guess who makes the drug? The pharmaceutical company. That's not unbiased. And then reliable. It has to be considered reputable by others. And then there you go, some government agencies, colleges and universities, media stories, and you can do your own research, by the way. That's actually entirely fine. All right, some guides to writing the need statement. Describe the need, describe who's affected, describe the factors, and describe the promise approach for improved results. In other words, describe how things will be better and how you're going to measure those so that the organization knows that you know what success looks like. Here's some good places to go if you're looking for stats. The Census Bureau, BLS, citydata.com is a good resource. All over, just do research. Do your research and you will find excellent data out there, and these are credible resources that you can use when you're putting together your need statement. Okay, so assignment 3 coming up. It has a couple parts. It has the problem statement, and you have to complete worksheet 3.1a. Make sure you do those. Make sure you write that problem statement in paragraph form, just like the examples I provided, and make sure it's clear and compelling and has all of the elements that it's supposed to have. This is one of your biggest assignments. Cite your sources using APA format. That's easy to find how to do that. Okay, and then your goals and objectives will be 4. So for this, again, your goals will be broad, objectives quantifiable using the SMART method. And I prefer 3, but you can have 4 objectives if you need to. And be sure to include the time frame, the group, who's affected, how much of a change, and then the geographic location. Okay, and that's it for the day. Thank you so much.